And I'd like to share a personal story similar to what some of the other speakers have done. Once upon a time, I was young, gifted, and at risk. Now, what am I? At least one of those things. But I want to give you all a sentence that resonates with some of what other speakers have talked about, and that is, risk factors are not predictive factors because of protective factors. And we've heard about risk this morning, we've heard about protective factors, and the key thing to take home from that tongue twister is that just because people are at risk doesn't mean they're going to have a bad outcome, and it's the protective factors that can make the difference, and those are some of the things that have been discussed today, and things that we need to invest in to help our students do well. I'll use me as a case in point. I'm in the baby boomer cohort. I was a child of the early years of school integration, and I was one of few black students in the elementary school that I attended. The other ones were primarily in the special education classes. And I was the only black child in my class and was supposedly the smartest in the class. And so that echoes some of what was said earlier about kind of the disconnect in terms of the stereotypes of black children not being excellent, not being high achievers, and me being that in this setting. I felt lonely and self-conscious in that environment. I felt anxious and uncomfortable when enslavement was discussed. In fourth grade, when it seemed like everybody's eyes were on me. And the way that I got through that is with my family and my friends. And yet, even though my father and my mother were quite supportive, my father was very strict, had very high expectations. He pushed me to learn every single vocabulary word in the back of the encyclopedia. And he and my mother had very high expectations. Of course, I wanted to please them. And I studied hard, got mostly A's, but when I didn't get an A, I had a lot of explaining to do to them and also to myself. I felt bad, I felt disappointed, and I wonder if this is where the seeds of perfectionism were planted. But what they didn't tell me is that they knew that I had to be twice as good in order to succeed and compete as a black girl in the world that I was moving towards. We moved to a more diverse community, and I attended public, junior, and senior high schools there, and things were better because I was no longer the only one. Yet, there were other pressures. I was, at one point, bullied by my black peers because I was studious. So there's another dynamic there that if you behave in a way that bucks the stereotypes, even those that are internalized by the African American community, that can come back to bite you too. And I think that speaks to what you mentioned about not belonging, you know, in either space. Again, what sustained me was family and friends and their support. Interestingly, you know, for some reason I was in such a hurry to finish high school and graduated in the 11th grade, and when I learned that I was accepted at an Ivy League college and shared that with some of my classmates, a white classmate whispered to another, the only reason that she got in is because she's black. And that hurt and made me wonder if that was true. Was this an injection of self-doubt? Perhaps. I went on to college at 16. I was a little fish in a big pond. The eliteness of the built environment was startling in its own ancient New England way. I encountered classmates that had come from the best of the best of the best prep schools, and this was somewhat intimidating given the level of work that they had been exposed to. And I began to ask myself the question, you know, do I belong here? I learned that my mother had breast cancer the first week freshman year of college, and it cast a shadow over my time there. And this just speaks to some of the trauma and the stress that students in general, and particularly students of color, may face. I mean, we know that there are disparities in health and illness and chronic disease and premature death. And it was a miracle that, with me being sad and worried most of the time in college, that I was able to get through it. She died at age 45 when I was a senior, and I struggled through the remaining months, but somehow graduated on time. So what got me through that stressful time? Certainly family and friends, but especially my extended family at college. And this resonates with some of what was discussed earlier, the importance of support, of social support. And it was quite amazing that even though African American students were very much in the minority, about 10% of each class, a close-knit community formed and was extremely supportive, and many of these relationships that were formed at that time for all of us, continue today, 40 years later. And I'm very deeply grateful to the faculty and staff that helped to create and maintain that kind of environment. And so some of what was discussed earlier, I really want to emphasize just how important that is. I attended medical school at a historically Black institution, and that was my first experience in such an environment, and I have to say that it was quite a validating experience, and being in the majority for the first time was a pleasure. My academic peers were my social peers, and there was just some efficiency in that. And, some people, many people don't necessarily enjoy medical school, but I think it was as fun as it could be for me. There was a lot of camaraderie among the students, which was inclusive of our white peers, and they were definitely in minority in that environment, but they also joined in the fun. I went from the Ebony Tower back to another ivory tower for my residency training. There were microaggressions there, like anywhere in our country, and vestiges of a segregated past still evident. But even in that environment, there was another nurturing community of African American, students of color, faculty of color, and staff of color at the medical school, which was a wonderful safety net and support. And out of that came numerous research collaborations, mentoring relationships, even marriages. And so it really does work to have these sorts of communities on campus, and people really shouldn't get upset when all the Black kids sit together at the Black table. And some people say, well, you should really mix and mingle. Of course, we had friends across racial and ethnic groups, but there's something about the grounding of in your particular culture that is particularly comforting, and that's not something that we should discourage. Because isolation is not a good recipe for mental health. People are relational creatures. They need connection to thrive. Were it not for the protective factors such as the cloak of family, friends, and student networks, I might have fled the sometimes challenging environments that I found myself in, and I might have missed out on many opportunities. And so that's the potential loss that we face, because many people do leave because it is just so uncomfortable. Being a high-achieving person, as we've heard this morning, is no protection from sadness and stress. Being a high-achieving person of color may even make you more vulnerable to sadness and stress. And people will ask you, well, what do you have to be sad and stressed about? You've gone to the best schools, you've got everything going for you. And so we also have to navigate that terrain of somehow being ungrateful or making excuses when it appears that we have all of the advantages. So again, I say risk factors are not predictive factors because of protective factors, and a key protective factor is social fabric, connection, and inclusion. I want to go off of that track just for a moment to mention some things that came to mind during the discussion today. And one of them was the importance of raising awareness about mental illness, particularly for communities for which it may carry a great deal of stigma. And I was at one point a fellow for the Center for Substance Abuse Prevention when I was at Johns Hopkins, and I had the opportunity to take a public health approach, a preventive approach to substance use disorders, and I chose to focus on unmet mental health need, in particular depression in the African American community. I developed a video called Black and Blue. It's not in a fancy cover or anything, and it's over 10 years old now, but still, I think is very, very moving as it presents from the mouths of African American adults and one young adult who's in the college age cohort who talk about their personal experience with depression. And it's useful for trainees who are learning about, what depression looks like in diverse population groups, and it's also helpful in the community to raise awareness, whether at a community center or a church or a physician's office. So I recommend that to you and can make available copies for those who are interested. The American Psychiatric Association has also recognized the importance of culturally specific public education materials, and we've had the good fortune of developing two of them. One, Mental Health, a guide for African Americans and their families, which includes a DVD, again with African American adults, talking about a number of different mental illnesses, schizophrenia, depression, bipolar disorder, and it also has a guidebook which has some helpful information about those illnesses and treatment for them. And also Mental Health, a guide for Latinos and their families, which is in English and Spanish, and provides information on a range of different mental illnesses. And both of these are available for free from the American Psychiatric Association, and for those of you who are interested, be happy to send you copies. But it's also available on the American Psychiatric Association's website. You can access both the guidebook and the DVD, the video footage electronically. Other things that came up in the discussion that I did want to be sure to touch on is what are some of the things that have worked, particularly with the African American community. There's some recent research that Dr. Elise Ward, who's a psychologist at University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee, funded by National Institute of Minority Health Disparities. I see some heads nodding, and she's developed a depression support group specifically for African Americans called Oh Happy Day. And that kind of resonates with people from a spiritual standpoint, very kind of positive approach. And she's seeing some very good results on having, I believe it's a 12-week program that involves a social worker or other mental health professional working with somebody with lived experience of depression. And these groups have resulted in improvements, significant improvements in depression screening scores. And so I'm very excited about this work, and have been helping Dr. Ward, identify other sites in which to test this. But it appears that it has great promise for use, and I'm hoping that it will be applicable to the college-age population as well, or some derivation of it, if not the current in its current form. I also wanted to mention that there is, and perhaps some of you know of the higher Education Mental Health Association, HEMHA, I don't know if that's how they pronounce the acronym, but focused on college mental health. And the American Psychiatric Association, where I am, has a very active college mental health caucus. And now I must say, I don't think they've actually focused on this topic, that kind of diversity among college students and focusing on specific populations. But I just wanted to make you aware that there is a very strong interest in college mental health. And this group, our mental health caucus, our college mental health caucus, has a very active listserv. And one of the members of it is putting on a program, Depression on College Campuses, Managing the Culture of Stress. That's going to be at University of Michigan, March 11th to 12th, 2015. And of course, I think it's important to talk about the intersection with race and ethnicity and the additional pressures that students of color face within that realm. I wanted to mention the Association of Black Psychologists, who a very active group that has developed a model for looking at issues of oppression and helping people with coping skills and healing, called emotional emancipation. And they reference some of the words of Martin Luther King, talking about the need for psychological freedom given some of the oppression and discrimination and so forth that African Americans and other people of color have faced. I don't know if there's been an emotional emancipation healing circle established yet for a college, but it seems like something like that is important, a space where people feel safe to talk about some of these issues. And certainly if we think about, the things that have been going on in our country, there continue to be irritants and things that continue to underscore some of the difficulties our country is having around how African American people are valued or not. And so helping people to channel their anger and their frustration in positive ways, I think is one aspect of the healing that needs to take place. And I applaud the Association of Black Psychologists for putting that model together.